Good evening and welcome to Information Please, your Peoria Public Library on the air, bringing you information about your library and your community. This evening, my guest is Kelsey Noack Myers, who comes from Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana, not Illinois, and she's going to talk about a program that she did recently at the library and kind of summarize some of that information for us so that everybody can hear it and enjoy it if you weren't able to get to the program. As part of our summer reading program, Pause to Read, wanted to bring a little bit of science to our reading program that's for all ages about our dogs. So welcome, Kelsey.
Hello.
You have got a really interesting area of research that I'm not sure how you got to it, but everybody enjoys hearing about this because, of course, everybody loves our dogs. Mm-hmm. People are so involved with their dogs, everything from, you know, the sweaters to the search and rescue and the therapy dogs and everything else, or just the old family pet out in your backyard. So how did you ever get to the point of researching all this about dogs?
Yeah, I was 2 years ago sort of shopping around for a dissertation topic and working at the Glenn Black Lab of Archaeology at IU and working with a collection from the WPA era, so late 1930s, a lot of people who couldn't get jobs after during and after the Great Depression, the federal program that hired people to go out and do things like, you know, road improvements and building trails. And
they built one of our libraries here. Our McClure branch is a WPA project, and of course our genealogy and local history collection is as organized as it is because the WPA came in and indexed the newspapers.
Great.
So,
well, I wish that they had had time to continue the project. The excavation that created the collection I was looking at actually ended sort of right in the middle of digging because World War II, the U.S. decided to join into World War II, and all the men who were working at the site excavating went and joined the military. It was a better opportunity for them, you know, for work. So this collection is somewhat still in the state it was when it was first dug up in the late 1930s and early 40s. Some of these things are sitting around in brown paper bags original to that time. The collection was stored in a barn for a while, so there's some other little critters have made nests and things in some of it. And so it's an old collection, but it's really exciting because it's from Angel Mounds, which is in southern Indiana near Evansville. It's right on the border.
Now that's a native settlement or burial? So
it's a mound center. If people are familiar with Cahokia in East St. Louis, Cahokia was the capital, if you think of it that way, of the Mississippian chiefdom, which about 900 years ago, it's about 1050 to 1450 are the AD, are the dates for Angel Mounds. There's a large mound center in St. Louis that was the capital, and then there were smaller mound centers around the Midwest, and one of them was near what's now Evansville, Indiana, on the Ohio. And so you've got multiple mounds that were ceremonial areas, and then you have big open plazas. Most of these sites look like that. They have mounds with a big open plaza that was public space, and then a lot of times they have a palisade, so a wall built around them, and then you have houses near
and apparently dogs as well.
Yeah, and so dogs were something that, you know, I love dogs. I have two, and so I was just kind of naturally drawn to these dog remains. When I was looking at this collection, because it was in such disarray, I decided that for a dissertation it was not the best collection to use because it's got some organizational problems. However, if I looked at just the dogs and not all of the animal remains, because I study diet normally, so I would have to look at all the animal remains to see everything they were eating. Now, the dogs are not like the usual animal bones in that you've got intact burials. So you've got dogs that are actually intentionally buried like a person, and then in analyzing the bones, you can learn more about what their life was like.
Okay, just as today, beloved pets are at the pet cemetery or in the backyard if you're not in the city, that kind of thing. So these dogs that you're looking at from 900 years ago, were actually somebody's beloved pet that was buried?
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of evidence that this is a dog that needed care. It was elderly, it was missing teeth, had arthritis, and so obviously somebody was, cutting up food to feed it and taking care of it, and then when it died, it was buried like a person, basically.
Cool.
Which
Okay.
it's a very rare thing for this time period in the Midwest. You don't see a lot of dog burials from Mississippian sites. So we're just beginning to understand what role dogs played in this Mississippian society.
Okay. Well, okay, so that's how you got started.
Yes.
But in the meantime, you also already knew and studied a lot about ancient dogs, and how did we end up with dogs 900 years ago being buried? Why do we have them in sweaters now?
Yeah.
How did dogs get to be such a part of human existence?
Right, and I have an image. The dogs that we're studying are more domesticated than the very earliest dogs, and so that's one thing in my presentation that I discussed, is that we're not exactly sure how long we've had dogs as domestic animals in terms of their biology, but through looking at the skull shapes and things like that, we knew that dogs were probably related to wolves fairly closely, and we can see now through DNA that they're actually 99.8% genetically similar. And so you may have heard dogs and wolves, or dogs and coyotes and wolves, they can all have puppies together. They're enough similar that they can interbreed. And so there have been a lot of studies done recently on the genetics of dogs to see how related they are that way, but we can also look at sort of the anthropology of dogs and how humans and dogs have kind of grown up together to be what we are now. They were the first animal to be domesticated anywhere in the world, and that happened sometime
before
between
cows, even
before anything else,
or
before
birds, the hunting
cats
birds.
and llamas and chickens and turkeys and everything. Dogs were the very first. So the oldest evidence we have right now is about 31,000 years old, and so we're mostly looking in Europe at those dogs.
Okay. Okay. So what do you think happened? How did the dog get from being the wolf in the forest?
Right. So, wolves they tend to be kind of scary.
Yeah.
And people don't really, that's not something you'd want in your house.
Yeah.
So there are two main theories. There's a lot, of course, discussion about, maybe arguing even about, how dogs happen to be dogs from wolves. One of the main theories is that they were helping us hunt large game. And we do have that evidence from the oldest dog remains. They've done isotopic analysis, and through that you can use chemistry to look at the bones and what the animal was eating over an extended period before it died. And we can see they were eating things like bison, deer, really large animals that they may have been able to hunt them in packs, but it's the same kind of things that humans were eating at that time.
Okay.
And they've actually found a dog that was buried with part of a mammoth bone in its mouth. That's been
Intentionally
in the news.
buried or just
yes,
found?
it was intentionally buried, and they're thinking it may have been an offering, sort of, or that they buried the dog with its favorite bone in its mouth, something like that. And so it was, 30,000 years ago plus. We have dogs, or somewhere between a wolf and a dog, that are living with humans enough that they're intentionally burying them, possibly with their favorite object already. So.
And your other picture up there, dumpster divers.
Yes, dumpster divers. And so dogs or wolves rather, and humans tend to occupy the same space ecologically, and they're eating the same things. And it would make sense that if humans have a kill site where they've killed a large animal and they've butchered it, there's the leftover scraps. And I'm sure everybody who has a dog is familiar with either your dog sitting under your feet while you're eating, or maybe they get into the trash while you're gone. And so it was probably a combination of both of these things that wolves and humans could work together in hunting large game. They may have cooperated, and wolves may have done that on their own, or it may have just been that they were enough in the same place that wolves started collecting the leftover scraps from humans, and the tame ones come closer, and over multiple generations they learn to hang around humans because it's beneficial for them. They get more food that way, and then they can have more puppies, and just sort of snowballs from there.
Anybody who's ever had a hunting dog, the way they work with humans, it's easy to understand how a dog could say, "Hey, I can help you with this, and then I can have the scraps."
Yeah.
Because the humans, if the dog helps them, they're going to reward them
Right.
with that.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
very opportunistic that way.
Yeah, they are. They are. But there's so many of them, so many
Yes.
different kinds.
There are. There are a lot of different kinds, and there's a lot of argument too about where all the different types of dogs came from. Working in North America, we are now establishing through DNA, which this is the very beginning of this process. We don't have a lot of this DNA information yet. We're actually able to sequence from some of the tooth roots, take samples and look at how related the dogs are. It seems like there may have been multiple domestication events even within North America. And there's more than one type of wolf. And like I said, wolves and coyotes and dogs can all interbreed. So there's probably a lot of admixture in terms of the genetics over time. And so you would have had some lines of dogs developing from some wolves that maybe didn't carry on. There have been remains found of dogs that they have no living relatives today. So maybe it was a line that was being produced, or they were producing themselves and they died out. And so it just happened to be where you were and when you were, if the dogs that you were living with were going to go on to reproduce, and which other dogs they were going to reproduce with. And we don't know for sure in the earliest domestication if these dogs were being bred intentionally or if it was just something that happened. The selection process for choosing traits in animals, because dogs were the first domesticated animal, breeding animals for specific traits wasn't something that probably happened right at the beginning.
That people did. They just,
yeah, it
was enough that the dog was close to you and
right.
hung out with you and
Right.
that kind of thing.
And if you had a nice dog that did something you really liked, you might take care of its puppies more than you take care of another dog's puppies, and sort of perpetuate a particular breed, as it were, that way.
Yeah. Well, and these pictures here show what you were talking about with angel mounds in Cahokia, and down there on the right, is that a picture of the dig?
That's from the WPA era. The whole site was excavated with these giant grid squares. They left walls in between to sort of keep the levels, visible, so they could document them. But the picture in the center there is an artist rendering of Angel Mounds, as it would have looked at the time it was occupied. You've got the mounds there and the East Village, all those little houses near the wall, the palisade wall. That's where the dog burial that I'm working with was found.
Okay.
And then the picture in the bottom corner, that's the sort of yellow and green one, is Cahokia. So that would have been the bigger capital, a lot more people living there. And then you can see sort of another artist rendering above that of some ceremonial stuff going on.
Okay.
That would have been, sort of what Mississippian people looked like, based on an artist rendering. But
Okay.
I've got shown on the map there. You can see Cahokia is near East St. Louis, and then Angel Mounds is near Evansville.
Yeah, and it's not all that far. It's just
No, it's
across
not.
the bottom of southern Illinois.
Right. Yeah, and Cahokia is actually a World Heritage Site, and a lot of people who live in the Midwest don't know anything about Mississippian. So, it's really cool if you get a chance to go down that way to go and check it out. Angel Mounds also has an interpretive center with a museum, and they have public programs several times a year. They have a website too you can look at.
So this, even for summer, it would be a fun thing with the
Yeah.
kids, because both of those are close enough to do a day trip or weekend trip, and
Yes.
and then come to the library, get some books, find out about it, add to your learning. Have there been any dog burials found at Cahokia?
There have, actually. A site that I worked at when I was still in undergrad at Southern Illinois University. The state of Illinois has been doing a lot of excavation there, preparing for road work, or in preparation for road work. It's now been completed, all the survey has, but I'm working with another graduate student who's at U of I in Champaign, also named Kelsey, Kelsey Witt, and she's doing the DNA sequencing for me. She's also been working with the dogs from Cahokia, or rather, right next to Cahokia, there's a site called the Janie B. Good site, and she's got 35 dogs from there that she's working with. So while they're not that common for this time period, the dog burials are kind of coming to light now, as I said.
Yeah,
this
35 dogs
Right.
seems like
A
an
lot.
enormous number to me from 900 years ago.
Right.
Yeah, and all deliberate burials. These are our pets. Or?
I'm not sure about the dogs in East St. Louis, if they were
Okay.
all pets. I do have components from Angel Mounds too that are dogs that were not buried intentionally as an intact animal.
Okay.
It's I I hate to read about it and think about it, but some of it, these dogs were used in ceremonies and as sacrifices and things like that. So they were, you know, offered up for other reasons, and they weren't necessarily pets that were pampered and you know, buried like a human, but they were important culturally and used that way.
Okay. Can you tell me, dogs have been used for many things through time. What are some early examples other than hunting that you know of that things dogs did? And I know kids like, you know, play with their dogs and think about what dogs have done, and so just anybody who loves dogs. So what are some of the ways people interacted with dogs?
Well, in North America, another thing besides having your dogs help you hunt would be they were, before horse culture kind of took over in a lot of places in North America, dogs were used for hauling materials. So you may have seen a travois before. It's basically just two sticks, you know, crossed, and they would put it over the back of the dog, and it could pull things that way. So if you're, you know, if you're moving around, you got to move camp from one place to another, you're following the animals that you're hunting, the dog, you know, you can sort of load it up with some things and it'll carry them around for you. Also guard dogs, you know, to let you know if you're out somewhere, you know, on the prairie, and, you know, at night when you're sleeping, you've got dogs around your camp. They're going to let you know if either there's predators sneaking around or other people coming up on where you're sleeping.
And dogs have always, I mean, modern dogs are very protective of their owners, and I imagine in that situation might be even a little more fierce and protective.
Right. Yeah. And there weren't, you know, as many people as animals in a lot of places at that time, and so dogs could be good for alerting you that there's a game walking by. You know, there's a herd of animals coming up, and you should drop everything and go get them. Or you know, that you need to be aware of wolves or something else like that. You know, large predators, bears, panthers, things like that.
Yeah. What about in Europe early on?
Yeah, dogs were really important and actually treated better than people in some cases. I worked with 17th century dogs from England and from the Jamestown settlement. When I was doing my master's research, I was out in Virginia working at Jamestown, and actually have a dog that was a juvenile, so a puppy, had the adult dentition unerupted. But it was much larger than all the other dogs I was finding, and so I started digging and doing some research on that, and that led me to find there are a lot of tapestries and illustrations of dogs in England from the 17th century. These very important dogs, they sort of had their portrait made in a tapestry. You know, they're wearing armor, they were taking them out to hunt things like wild boar and bear, and they were very much a status symbol. So there were common dogs that people just had around. It was like, you know, the family pet, but for the higher status people, higher society, they would have these very, you know, important dogs that they would dress in, you know, it's very elaborate embroidered, you know, armor jackets and
so
things
clothes
like that.
on dogs is not new.
It's a very, very long history, at least, I would say, you know, at least 400 years, 500-600 years.
And there are many dogs out there that don't mind wearing things
no, they don't,
at all.
especially if it makes them look good. You know?
Yeah, they're fine with it.
Yes.
So while your husband's making fun of you for having bows on the dog's ear, you just tell him it's nothing new.
Right, that's right. We have to decorate our dogs.
And so you said there was a puppy at Jamestown?
There was. It was. It had the teeth were unerupted, which just doing a size comparison, looking at it, I could see that this mandible, which is the jawbone, was much larger than all the other dogs. And we had a digital X-ray tomography system out there, and I said, why don't we X-ray it and see? Because we found, we being the archaeological community, have found dogs before from that time period that were hunting dogs, larger breeds that actually had lead shot embedded somewhere in the skeleton, because, you know, they're out there with prey animals and might accidentally get in the way. And I wanted to see if maybe that had happened to this dog. There was no evidence of what killed it based on just the mandible, but I did find out that it was a juvenile. And in the writings for Jamestown, they mention their ship's dog. So this is continuing research that's sort of on a back burner right now, but I'm also interested in looking at these dogs first being brought over from England to North America, you know, in sort of the mid-Atlantic region during the colonial period.
Wow. Well, I think you've also got an image of a skeleton.
Yes.
And so maybe we want to look at that.
Going back to the the Mississippian dogs. This is the dog burial that I've been working with the most, and this is from the WPA era also. This photo is the only photo I have of this dog burial in situ, so still in the ground. There is no map, hand-drawn map. I have all the coordinates on the bags, and you can see all those the FS23. Those are all the identification numbers from the excavation at the bottom. And this photo has actually been blown up into a large banner that's hanging over the lobby of the museum and lab where I work now. Okay. And I walked by it every day for a year, and then all of a sudden I realized, oh, that's the dog I'm working on, because it's the only dog burial image that we have. And so I went into storage, and I got this set of remains out and was sort of looking through it, and I found that it's got several teeth missing, and they weren't just teeth that fell out after it was buried. You can see that the bone is sort of resorbed, and so those sockets had closed up. And so this is a dog that had been running around with some missing teeth for a while. Looking at the vertebra, there's evidence of arthritis there. There's arthritis in the feet. And so, this is a dog that would have been kind of creaky, probably not moving very fast anymore, and not able to chew like it used to be able to. And so my research had sort of stopped there, and just looking at the bones and taking measurements to do a stature reconstruction and things like that. And
when you say reconstruction, how big is he?
Yeah,
what would he have been?
I found out that this dog is probably about a 50-pound dog. So about, a small retriever size. It's actually, I was measuring one of my own dogs at home when I got home that day. I think it was about 52 centimeters at the shoulder is what the estimate gives me for how tall this dog was. And I don't have the back feet or the entire tail, so I couldn't say for sure whether it had a curly tail or a straight tail. And of course, you can't tell really much about the ears from looking at the skeleton. But it does have a very prominent sagittal crest, so this ridge back here. So this would have been a bigger dog for this time period. It also had very powerful chewing muscles. A lot of the real early dogs look like a Siberian Husky, kind of. So this dog was probably, it doesn't have like the long nose like a hound maybe. It's a little shorter, but not like a boxer or a pit bull or anything like that, but just like a heavier set dog that had real powerful chewing muscles. And then when you look at the teeth, I had some photos in my other presentation. The teeth are very worn down, the canines especially, and that's one of the teeth that's missing. I think it was missing like the canine up here and then some of the teeth around it. But these would have been very worn down. So this is a dog that was an aggressive chewer, if people are familiar with that term. It's something that probably, it's a dog that probably chewed on a lot of bones, which interestingly in the image, there's another set of mandibles, jaw bones. They're sort of pedestaled there. That's another dog that I sent for DNA sequencing. And there's yet another dog that you can't see in this image that was disarticulated, another mandible with some more teeth. And then there's sort of, there's a grouping of 4 bones laid out in the top right corner. And I looked at those, and those aren't all dog bones. One of those is actually a golden eagle bone that has carnivore chewing on it. So, just around the lab when we were talking about why is this eagle bone buried with these dogs, and it's got chewing on it. And they said, well, maybe the dog ate, something that was made out of an eagle wing or something like that, because it is a wing bone. And then, it was its favorite toy or something. And, that's just, kind of a joke. But it's really interesting because I didn't only find the eagle bone, I also found sandhill crane and red-tailed hawk bones mixed in with some of the dog burials. And these are not easy birds. These are big, dangerous birds that can attack you.
But those have been also hunting companions to humans? I don't think a sandhill crane would have been.
There's no evidence that birds of prey were used for hunting by Mississippian people. So it's really interesting because these were likely ceremonial objects. These are not meaty parts of the bird. So
it's something
still kind of
ceremonial
working on why these are there. The thing that comes most to mind is a fan, because the wing bones, that's what they're going to be associated with, is the wing, with the feathers on and everything. They could have been used for other things, but they don't make great tools. They're not the best part of a bird to make bone tools out of.
So probably something decorative.
Yeah, still something I'm working on. It hasn't been the focus. I am looking at the dogs, which I have one image left of the teeth that I used. And so These teeth, I actually made a connection with the Children's Museum in Indianapolis. They have a paleo lab there, and they do dinosaur bones mostly. And so they have the equipment and the information on how to make plastic casts of these things. And so I was actually able to copy all these teeth in plastic before sending them off for DNA sequencing, because to take a sample of the root of the tooth, it's destructive. And so I am working too in the next year on having these plastic replicas of the skeleton as part of an exhibit at our museum, the Mathers Museum on the IU campus. And so I'd like to have a hands-on component so that we can actually, kids could come in and they can play with, some of the dog remains in plastic and sort of do their own archaeology and reconstruct the dog.
Well, that's wonderful. We'll look forward to that. Thank you so much for recapping your presentation for those who couldn't make it. I think it's really fascinating for dog lovers everywhere. So if you'd like to see what's going to be happening at Peoria Public Library coming up, just look at our website at peoriapubliclibrary.org, and we'll see you next week on Information Please.